We're at the AVA Gallery, 11 Bank Street, Lebanon, New Hampshire, at a really magnificent show by Paul Gruhler. And I have to say, this is the day before it closes, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, we're really going to miss it. I personally am going to miss it. I've been over here several times. It's really perfect in this room. How did you feel when you walked in and saw this room was yours?
Well, it seems like it's a perfect space for this type of work, and the lighting is wonderful from the outside. And also the relationships of each painting, you know, to see them in a line
Yes.
together, and how they interrelate to each other as the light changes in here is quite
Yes.
wonderful.
It's a real light show.
Yeah.
Because we have these wonderful big windows which opens this gallery and the AVA community to the community of Lebanon. And even the dimensions of the windows, these wonderful gridded forms, often there'll be reflections I've seen as I've come in at other times, where a line that just comes because of the light starts acting with your painting. You want to talk about what inspires you to do this sort of beautiful geometric
Well,
painting?
it's been a process over many years, and I am trying to get the color and line and form to work as a whole and speak. And I've been working recently in the last 5 years on both horizontal and vertical space. Before, I often either did, you know, horizontal paintings or vertical, paintings. So I'm trying to get this combination to work as a whole.
Well, you know, it's interesting you're saying that, because I've started to really, really stare as you were talking about that. And as in, you know, the Albers color theories have, you stare at a certain colors, you start, I'm not only getting shades of complementaries as I shift my gaze, but lines. So it's working in both ways, not just with the color. You can begin to create. You can't call them imagined, because it's really real what happens with our eyes. I don't know that cameras show that, but it's a wonderful phenomenon.
And as we come to each painting, depending on the light and actually how we feel, we have a different reaction to color and the relationships of each color in the painting, and then as a whole, when you scan the whole wall.
Now, on all of these paintings in this exhibition, I've really loved looking at what I think of as the edge. Each has, it first appears almost as if these were the framing of a picture, and then they're not. They're vibrating within the canvas. So although this only has the sides, so you have vertical edges, then this is enclosed. And even though it's the raw linen, the reflection against the color of this neutral, is that part of the...
It's part of the composition.
And the quest on your work.
And I've been working on, you know, incorporating the canvas, you know, into the rest of the composition at different stages. But more recently, I've been using less canvas.
Very interesting.
Because I feel that it creates more of a tension.
So the later pieces are often having these divisions. So
Right.
this becomes a diptych, really.
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about the relationship of these various changes in palette? Are they symbolic or just in your...
Almost all of my colors are mixed. And as I'm working on the painting, sometimes I continue to mix the colors, even though I've had a preconceived notion when I started out. And then I try to get subtle changes between the different forms, often, of the color. And I just try to make it work as a whole.
You know, when I first came in, because I've studied a lot of geometric art, I was a student in the 50s, late 50s, where we did, and this is so different, really, from the use of primary color palettes, and it's also very different than Albers. And it's just playing a whole new game with black and everything. I mean, here black is a color if we go on to this piece, but here it's really a directional signal, and it's just balancing back its task as an element. I love that.
Well, a lot of the black is actually purple.
Is it really?
Yes.
Oh, there's another trick. So is this got some purple?
It is purple, very dark
Yeah,
purple.
so it depends on what it's on.
Right.
And then on here,
Yeah.
oh, you have to be in the space, I think, to see that in the light.
And each one is
Just a little
different.
bit, these are different.
I just tweak them a little bit as I go along.
Well, what it does is it makes you pay a lot more attention, not just to the color in the painting, but every single thing I look at, whether it's your complexion or the camera wounds coloring today, it makes you just really sensitive.
Well, the more we look, the more we see.
Yeah, and in this case, it's color
And you have to take the time to
pay attention.
look.
Now, at the opening, I have to admit, I have been here several times and I hadn't begun to see the differences in the dark. So these are paintings that you could come and see many, many times. Maybe that's why I did.
Good, thank you.
So is this the largest painting?
Yes.
I guess it is. So this is a horizontal format, and I think that is,
And about
And
3
this one
years
is-
ago, I started just to go to the square.
yeah.
And
So let's talk about the
And
square.
I'm not sure I have an explanation for
Well, you don't
why.
need it. Let's look at the ones that are square. Now, this sort of palette, again, this is so different than what I mean, I'm much more aware of Mondrian and Fritz Garner and that whole group around the geometric extraction painters. And none of them explored in this way these very subtle differences. It was much more about almost a loud action of color. And it was beautiful, and I love it still. But this is not, did it grow from that kind of sensibility, or what?
Well, many people have influenced me.
Yes.
You know, especially Malevich, and,
Oh,
and the
good.
strength of Malevich, and then through the Bauhaus with Joseph Albers and
Yeah.
Paul Klee and others, and then really what was in the 50s, in the late 50s, abstract expressionism was really there were many exhibitions and very strong in New York. And I saw many of those exhibitions, and I was really moved by Clifford Still's work.
Oh, yes.
And of course, Rothko
Yes.
especially.
Oh, yes.
But, so it was kind of indirectly,
So
an indirect influence.
modern work from maybe the late 20s on began
Right.
to be a part of your understanding as a painter.
And I just tried to incorporate my own vision in what I felt without being repetitive of the past and
And it's not.
taking it hopefully to a new place.
Well, you definitely have. You know, Malevich, I hadn't thought about that, but that's drawing me back in my memory to how things were placed on their construction. They're not just about moving paint. And I'm beginning to understand some of these lines a little more clearly in reference to they are constructs.
But line and
Even though they
abstract
don't-
art really started from the beginning of our culture. You know, the Native Americans and the Chinese and the Greeks all had, in their very early art, totally abstract line and forms without any realistic figures. So this is something that goes way back in our culture to the beginning.
Well, it's-
And there have just been reinterpretations of
Yeah.
the same.
And in some ways, you're going back to the essence of these kinds of things. And when I use the word structure, I do mean that. I mean, you know, the things that might be automatically felt.
And when I'm painting, I get into a meditative state,
Uh-huh.
and I have to be at peace and in a really different place to be able to work. Otherwise, it's confusion to me.
So is that why you're living in Frasbury, Vermont?
I'm living there because I just have a wonderful place to live, and I feel a connection to the land and the landscape And the environment there of farming and sustainability is what attracted me to that area, in addition to having many close friends close by. So I have a
Well, it's good you're in Vermont, you're getting to see this great stuff. And having been raised in New York, or had, your early part of your career was definitely in New York City, right?
I was in New York until 1979.
Oh, I'm glad you're in Vermont.
I feel very fortunate to be.
Now, here you're using, as we spoke earlier, the linen is perfectly stretched, tight, beautiful surface itself as part of the construction. And I would almost say, for me, this is the most active use of the raw canvas. When was this done? It was fairly
It
recent.
was in 2005. So this has been my exploration over the last 5 years, basically. And
This is it. The more you look at them, the more you want to just look at one, so you so it can get more in. Because I know they're leaving. I wish I could say to the people who see this on television that you can see these here at AVA, but on February 6th they do come down. But where can people see your work? Can they see it?
well, I have a website which
Yeah.
I update frequently,
Yeah.
and then I have a couple of other exhibitions
Coming
coming up
up.
this
So
year.
people could look on the website and see when they'll next be
Right.
in their area, because these are paintings that I know artists really would love to see them in more venues, so. Let's look at a few more. Now, this is one with the use of the dark that is more clearly, for me, maybe because it's all the same tonal level, and I can see the difference in the darks, and I'm hoping the camera can, because what we were speaking of earlier, that the black so often could look like black in a certain context, but here, it's clearly not. You get a sense of that, the warmth of this versus this, but if they were any further removed, you might not notice. And each little strip. It's amazing how much these fit in this kind of architecture, too, of this space. And maybe later, Ella, you'll take a few shots of the proportions above the windows and so on. It's a great building, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful. What an accomplishment for the
Yeah.
community.
Oh, we're so lucky. Look at this great streak down here. That makes me think of, in terms of color, maybe Paul Klee or,
Yeah.
that's a great piece.
Well, I got to a certain point with this painting, and then I wasn't sure sometimes how to go on.
Yeah.
And the magenta came to me, and it's not something that I used in this way very often,
No.
But it created a contrast, and for me, it pulls the whole painting together.
It's a wonderful idea that being here, looking at it with this little bit of green and then moving through to the green here and here, that wonderful vibration. It's almost like neon in the middle. Gives it a real hit. These two, especially this one, I guess both, when we were talking about Rothko, the palette in a way is very reminiscent here. And oddly enough, I never thought of that when I came, so it's clearly not derivative. It's definitely your own work.
But also,
It has that same-
but also the texture of Clifford Still,
Yes, I see what you mean.
especially in this work here. If you can get it from the side, the
Yeah,
texture
you can
was
see it.
intentional
Yeah.
to create a depth and
Yeah, and from this angle, it's almost like a Japanese silk, the luster, and change of direction. I'm assuming that is how it's applied, not so much the medium.
yes,
It's how you brush it on.
yeah.
Beautiful.
If you come to this side, you can get that a little better, the texture.
The stroke actually changes the way the light hits it, and changes the color. Not the color so much as the tone.
Mhm.
which we interpret as color, but
Well, it creates a depth too.
yeah, vibration in and out. I think this is a great example of the horizontal, and then you're hit with the square, and then we get this very strong central vertical. So
Well, this
really playing with the geometry of space in the world and on the planet and in our minds.
This is another painting that I struggled with. I got so far, and I hadn't decided on the color in the center.
Yeah.
And it just pulled it together, you know. I know instantaneously sometimes when I see the colors together that it's going to work, but because I tape, I really don't know what I have until I take the tape.
Until you pull the tape.
Until I take the tape.
Now, do you ever do things like, I remember as a student, I would sometimes take strips with color and just place them right in the paint to look. Do you
Yeah.
have to do that, or your
No.
eye is so trained now you don't?
No, I mean, I've kind of
You know,
have
it's
the
in your
sense
mind.
of
Yeah.
the relationship, how it's going to work, but the final, I can't know until the end.
Till you pull the tape.
Until I do the whole painting.
Yeah. Well, they, I'm sure will come out really in wonderful, vibrant ways in terms of the film or the digital imagery. But of course, nothing ever replaces visiting paintings back and forth in different light and getting to talk to the artist or
It's
to
a
other
different
people. When you go
experience.
look at art, it's good to go with someone who wants to stay a long time. I'm standing here trying to figure out if, because I'm looking into the light, it's a little more difficult, if the color crossing through the dark changes when it gets to the other side of the painting, or if it's just my eyes.
You mean this form here, or?
No, this, the
Yeah.
dark.
That's all.
It's all one.
It's the relationship with the
So
color
making it
that's
vibrate.
under it.
Yeah. Like we
That's-
all learned from Albers too.
It's creating the tension.
Yeah. It's very interesting how successful, to me, you've been with having these either broad edges or the narrow ones, and how bright they feel and how different they are. It's not a habit. You're not just saying, oh, that works, because it wouldn't.
Well,
And
I don't
I'm
wanna-
learning a lot looking at that.
I don't want to have a formula, and I want each painting to be unique. So
There you
I
are.
don't try variations on a form.
No.
I just keep,
And I think sometimes there is a form of more geometric art that does become formulaic. And it's interesting to some people because they like kind of measuring and thinking about rational, relationships maybe. And then there's feeling in geometry. And I think that's very present in this, much more, most organic as you begin to let it sink
well,
in.
I like each painting to be a unique experience.
So what are you up to now as you go forward after this show?
I'm in the studio every morning by
good.
7 o'clock and
Yeah,
just work away.
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see more work by you and to see
Thank
you again talk about art.
And my next exhibition will be all new work, all different work than what's been in this exhibition.
Be sure to let us know.
Thank you. I will.
Thank you for coming to AVA and being part of this community for a while through your work. And
It's been my
I'm
pleasure. Thank you.
personally delighted it's been here. Thank you.
They did.